Did you ever look back at the funniest holiday traditions from the 1980s and wonder how any of us survived? Back then, these traditions shaped every December with joy, chaos, and risks nobody questioned. So what turned those beloved memories into banned activities? Leaving homemade fruitcakes unrefrigerated for weeks was practically a holiday tradition in the 1980s, and nobody batted an eye when those dense loaves sat on kitchen counters from Thanksgiving straight through New Year. Families believed the rum soaked into every layer acted as a natural preservative, keeping the cake safe from anything that might spoil it. Grandmothers wrapped them in cheesecloth, tucked them into decorative tins, and set them out proudly for any visitor who walked through the door. Kids would sneak slices between meals, and nobody worried about refrigeration or food safety guidelines. The cakes became centerpieces and edible antiques all at once. People trusted the density and the alcohol to outlast any germ. But what nobody realized was that these conditions were perfect for bacterial growth, especially once the cake was sliced open and exposed to air. Health officials eventually caught up, issuing warnings about perishable ingredients hiding inside what seemed indestructible. Today, leaving baked goods out for weeks triggers immediate concern, but back then it was simply how the holidays worked. Kids riding in open pickup truck beds to choose Christmas trees was one of those holiday adventures that felt like pure freedom in the 1980s. Families loaded up after breakfast, drove out to rural tree farms, and let children bounce around the open bed with nothing but cold air and excitement between them and the road. Parents believed the slow country roads were safe enough, and kids loved standing up, gripping the sides, and pretending they were explorers on a winter expedition. The wind whipped through their jackets, the pine trees grew closer with every mile, and nobody wore seatbelts because there were none to wear. Once the perfect tree was found, it got tossed in the back alongside the kids, branches poking every direction as the truck rumbled home. Everyone laughed at the chaos, the cold, and the bits of pine needles stuck to everything. Today, this would result in immediate fines, child endangerment charges, and horrified stares from every passing driver. Pickup bed riding is now banned under child passenger safety laws nationwide, but for an entire generation, it remains one of the most vivid memories of holiday seasons past. Spraying fake snow indoors without any ventilation was one of those holiday rituals that made living rooms look like winter wonderlands while quietly filling the air with something far less magical. In the 1980s, families grabbed aerosol cans of artificial snow and coated windows, mirrors, and Christmas trees without opening a single window or turning on a fan. The hissing sound of the spray became part of the festive soundtrack, and the sweet chemical smell was simply accepted as the scent of the season. Kids loved watching the white foam settle onto glass, creating frost patterns that looked almost real. Parents aimed the cans at every reflective surface, layering the effect until the room sparkled. Nobody thought about what they were breathing in or how long those particles lingered in the air. The propellants and chemicals inside those cans could irritate lungs, trigger headaches, and build up in enclosed spaces faster than anyone realized. Today, safety codes require ventilation for any aerosol use indoors, and many older formulas have been banned entirely. But in the 80s, a cloudy living room just meant Christmas was finally here. Using exploding Christmas crackers with gunpowder charges was the kind of holiday tradition that made every dinner table feel like a tiny fireworks show. In the 1980s, families passed around brightly wrapped tubes that popped with a bang loud enough to make the dog run for cover. Kids pulled the ends with their cousins, laughing as paper crowns, tiny toys, and terrible jokes spilled out amid a puff of smoke. The louder the crack, the better the cracker, and some imports packed enough punch to leave ears ringing. Nobody questioned what made them pop so dramatically, and parents handed them to toddlers without a second thought. The smell of burnt paper mixed with the aroma of holiday dinner, and everyone treated the little explosions as harmless fun. But the gunpowder-style charges inside these crackers carried real risks, from burns to hearing damage to unexpected fires when sparks landed on tablecloths. Regulators eventually restricted the explosive content allowed in consumer crackers, and many of the louder versions disappeared from store shelves entirely. Today, a Christmas cracker barely whispers compared to the bangs that once echoed through 80s dining rooms. Drinking hot cocoa from cadmium-glazed holiday mugs was one of those cozy traditions that turned out to carry a secret nobody wanted to discover. In the 1980s, cheerful ceramic mugs decorated with Santas and snowmen filled kitchen cabinets everywhere. Families poured steaming cocoa into these colorful cups without wondering what made the reds and oranges glow so vividly. Kids wrapped their hands around the warm ceramic, sipping marshmallow-topped drinks while watching holiday specials. The mugs felt festive and perfectly suited for cold December nights. What nobody knew was that cadmium, a toxic heavy metal, was often used in the glazes that created those brilliant colors. When hot liquids touched the surface, trace amounts could leach into every sip. Repeated exposure built up slowly, potentially damaging kidneys and bones without immediate symptoms. Once researchers connected the dots, regulators banned cadmium from food contact ceramics entirely. Families who cherished those vintage mugs faced the uncomfortable choice of keeping them as decorations or throwing them away. Today, those bright cups remind us that even the warmest traditions can hide unexpected dangers. Kids operating electric turkey carvers at holiday dinners was considered a proud rite of passage in the 1980s, the kind of moment fathers used to teach responsibility and trust. The electric carver buzzed loudly as it sliced through golden skin and tender meat, and children as young as 10 were handed the vibrating handle with nothing more than a quick demonstration. Parents stood nearby with encouragement rather than concern, believing that learning to carve built character and prepared kids for adulthood. The blades were sharp, the motor was powerful, and the whole family watched as Junior tried to keep the slices even. Sometimes fingers got too close, sometimes the bird slipped on the platter, and sometimes the cord tangled in ways that made everyone nervous. But accidents were treated as learning experiences rather than emergencies. Today, motorized carving knives come with strict warnings about keeping them away from children, and no responsible parent would hand one to a kid at the dinner table. The tradition of letting children handle dangerous kitchen tools has quietly disappeared, replaced by safety guidelines that would have baffled 80s families. Running extension cords under carpets for tree lights was the quick fix every 80s family used to hide the tangle of wires that came with holiday decorating. Nobody wanted orange cords snaking across the living room floor, so the solution was simple. Lift the rug, tuck the cord underneath, and forget about it until January. The carpet flattened over the wire, creating a seamless look that made the setup appear almost magical. Kids ran across those hidden cords without knowing what was underneath, and furniture pressed down on sections nobody thought to check. What families did not realize was that extension cords generate heat when powering multiple strands of old Christmas lights. Trapped under carpet, that heat had nowhere to go, building up until insulation weakened or wires began to smolder. House fires traced back to hidden cords became disturbingly common during the holiday season. Today, electrical codes strictly prohibit running cords under rugs or any covering that could trap heat. Fire departments issue annual warnings, and modern families use cord covers instead. But for an entire decade, the hidden cord was just how Christmas worked. Letting children light sterno cans for buffet warmers was one of those party traditions that somehow felt completely normal in the 1980s. Holiday gatherings meant crowded tables filled with chafing dishes, and keeping the food warm required those small cans of gel fuel tucked beneath each tray. Parents often handed matches or lighters to kids, trusting them to ignite the cans while adults finished setting up the rest of the spread. Children loved the responsibility, the small blue flame that flickered to life, and the grown-up feeling of contributing to the party. Nobody worried about burns, spills, or the flammable gel splattering if a can got knocked over. The cans sat inches from paper napkins, plastic tablecloths, and decorations that could catch fire in seconds. Some kids learned the hard way that sterno flames are nearly invisible in bright light, leading to singed fingers and startled yelps. Today, letting a child handle open flame fuel sources would be considered reckless. Modern buffet setups use electric warmers or insulated containers, and sterno cans carry explicit warnings about adult supervision. But back then, it was just another way kids helped out at holiday parties. Tossing metallic tinsel on trees near overheating bulbs was the finishing touch that made every 1980s Christmas tree shimmer like something out of a dream. Families draped strand after strand of thin silver tinsel across branches already heavy with lights and ornaments. The effect was dazzling, catching every flicker and reflecting it back in waves of sparkling color. Kids loved throwing handfuls at once, watching the strands float down and settle wherever they landed. Nobody thought about the fact that many of those tinsels still contained lead, a toxic metal that could flake off onto hands and floors. Even worse, the metallic strands often draped directly over old incandescent bulbs that burned hot enough to toast fingers. The combination of flammable materials, high heat, and conductive metal created risks nobody discussed at the time. House fires sometimes traced back to tinsel igniting near overheated lights, and lead concerns eventually pushed manufacturers to change formulas. Today, lead tinsel is banned, and modern LED lights run cool enough to touch. But the memory of those glittering, dangerous trees still sparkles for everyone who decorated one. Kids testing new chemistry sets by the fireplace was the kind of Christmas morning adventure that made the 1980s feel both exciting and slightly unhinged. These sets came packed with real chemicals, glass beakers, and experiment cards that encouraged mixing and heating without much adult involvement. Children unwrapped their gifts, spread everything across the living room floor, and immediately began experimenting just feet from the crackling fire. The warmth felt cozy, the flames provided light, and nobody considered that open fire plus unknown chemical reactions might create problems. Some experiments produced smoke, others fizzed dramatically, and a few released smells that cleared the room faster than any cooking disaster. Parents glanced over occasionally, but mostly trusted the booklets to keep things safe. What nobody realized was that certain chemicals were flammable or capable of producing toxic fumes when warmed. Modern chemistry sets have been stripped down to nearly harmless components, with strict warnings about adult supervision and ventilation. But for 80s kids, mixing mysterious powders by firelight was simply how science happened on Christmas Day. Burning glossy gift wrap in the fireplace was the lazy cleanup solution that every 1980s family used without a second thought. After the presents were opened and the living room floor was buried under mountains of crinkled paper, someone always had the bright idea to toss it all into the flames. Kids loved watching the shiny paper curl, blacken, and burst into colorful flashes as the metallic coatings ignited. The fire roared higher than usual, and everyone gathered around to admire the impromptu light show. Nobody considered what those glossy finishes were actually made of or what happened when they burned. The inks, dyes, and metallic coatings released toxic fumes that drifted through the room and up the chimney. Worse, the intense heat from burning paper could crack chimney liners or ignite creosote buildup that had been waiting for exactly this kind of spark. Fire departments later traced numerous holiday chimney fires back to this exact tradition. Today, burning wrapping paper is strongly warned against, and recycling programs accept most gift wrap instead. But in the 80s, watching paper burn was simply part of how Christmas morning ended. Drinking punch from lead crystal holiday bowls was the elegant centerpiece of every 1980s party, and nobody imagined the sparkling vessel could be anything but harmless. These bowls caught the light beautifully, chiming with a delicate ring when the ladle tapped their sides, making every gathering feel refined. Families filled them with fruit punch or spiked eggnog and let the drink sit for hours as guests helped themselves throughout the evening. What nobody realized was that lead crystal earned its name honestly, containing actual lead that slowly leached into acidic beverages. Fruit juices and citrus-based punches pulled the metal out of the glass with every passing minute. Guests sipped contaminated drinks while complimenting the beautiful bowl, never suspecting they were consuming something that could accumulate in their bodies over time. Once researchers connected lead crystal to measurable blood lead levels, warnings spread quickly, and many families packed away their cherished serving pieces. Today, those elegant bowls sit mostly unused, beautiful reminders that sophistication and safety did not always go hand in hand. Kids climbing aluminum ladders to hang outdoor lights was the kind of holiday helper tradition that made perfect sense in the 1980s. Parents needed extra hands to string lights along roof lines, and children were eager to prove they could handle grown-up tasks. Aluminum ladders were lightweight and seemed perfectly safe propped against the house. Nobody thought twice about sending a 10-year-old up the rungs with Christmas lights wrapped around one arm. The metal ladder conducted cold straight through winter gloves, and the rungs grew slippery when frost appeared, but kids climbed anyway. What nobody considered was that aluminum conducts electricity just as well as it conducts cold. If a frayed wire touched the ladder, or if lights were plugged in while someone was adjusting them, the shock could travel instantly through the metal frame. Add in the risk of falls from icy rungs, and the tradition becomes alarming in hindsight. Today, safety guidelines prohibit children from climbing ladders, and many families hire professionals instead. But back then, sending kids up the ladder was just how the house got decorated. Using real candles and paper. Christmas decorations was the kind of cozy tradition that made 1980s living rooms glow with warmth and danger in equal measure. Families crafted elaborate paper chains, tissue snowflakes, and folded stars that hung from ceiling to floor, creating a handmade winter wonderland. Real candles flickered on mantels and tables positioned just below those delicate paper creations. The combination looked magical, and nobody dwelled on what might happen if a draft pushed paper too close to flame. Kids added new decorations throughout the season, sometimes pinning them directly above candle arrangements. The dry paper absorbed warmth from the candles below, becoming more flammable with each passing day. One strong breeze or curious pet could send the whole display up in flames faster than anyone could react. Today, fire codes strictly prohibit open flames near paper decorations in schools, churches, and most public spaces. Many families have switched to battery-operated candles that flicker convincingly without any risk. But the memory of real candlelight dancing beneath paper snowflakes remains impossibly beautiful. Leaving space heaters running all night near Christmas trees was the winter survival strategy that kept countless 1980s living rooms warm while everyone slept. Older homes often had drafty corners where the central heating simply could not reach, and families plugged in portable heaters to compensate. These units glowed orange and radiated heat in every direction, including toward the Christmas tree standing just a few feet away. Nobody thought to move the tree or reposition the heater, because the setup had worked fine for years. The tree dried out a little more each day, its needles becoming crispy and brittle as December wore on. Meanwhile, the heater hummed through the night, baking the lower branches with constant warmth. The combination was a fire waiting to happen, and it happened more often than families wanted to admit. A single spark, a tipped heater, or needles falling onto the heating element could ignite the entire tree in seconds. Today, fire safety standards require space heaters to have automatic shutoffs and tip-over protection, and warnings about keeping them away from flammable materials are printed on every box. But in the 80s, the heater just stayed on. Kids eating candy canes colored with red dye number 2 was as normal as hanging stockings in the 1980s, and nobody questioned what made those stripes so brilliantly red. The candy canes hung from tree branches, poked out of stockings, and filled jars on kitchen counters throughout the season. Children sucked on them until their tongues turned crimson, and sometimes ate 3 or 4 in a single afternoon. The bright color seemed festive and cheerful, exactly what a holiday treat should look like. What families did not know was that red dye number 2 had been banned by the FDA in 1976 after studies linked it to cancer in laboratory animals. However, products manufactured before the ban continued circulating for years, and some imported candies kept using the dye long after American regulations changed. Parents unknowingly handed out treats containing a substance the government had deemed unsafe. By the time awareness spread, countless children had consumed candy colored with a banned carcinogen. Today, candy manufacturers use safer alternatives, and ingredient labels receive far more scrutiny. But those bright red candy canes carried risks nobody saw coming. Serving kids rum-soaked fruitcake as dessert was a holiday tradition that raised no eyebrows whatsoever in the 1980s. Grandmothers spent weeks preparing dense, sticky loaves saturated with enough rum or brandy to preserve them through the entire season. The alcohol was considered a flavoring agent, not an intoxicant, and slices were offered freely to children alongside milk and cookies. Kids made faces at the strong taste but ate it anyway because refusing food from grandma was unthinkable. Some families even bragged about how much liquor went into their recipe, treating it as a badge of quality rather than a concern. Nobody calculated how much alcohol a child might actually consume from a generous slice of properly soaked fruitcake. The assumption was that baking and aging burned off most of the alcohol, though this was more wishful thinking than science. Today, serving alcohol-laden desserts to children would draw immediate criticism and concern about appropriate boundaries. Modern recipes often use fruit juice or extract instead of actual spirits when children are involved. But in the 80s, a boozy slice of fruitcake was simply how the holidays tasted, no matter how old you were. Using mercury thermometers to check turkey doneness was the trusted method that kept holiday birds from becoming dry disasters throughout the 1980s. Every kitchen drawer held at least one glass thermometer filled with silvery liquid that rose and fell with temperature. Cooks jabbed them into turkey thighs, checked the reading, and left them sitting in the hot bird for hours. The glass tubes fogged up, the mercury climbed, and nobody worried about what might happen if the thermometer cracked. These thermometers were fragile, and extreme heat combined with repeated handling made breakage almost inevitable over time. If the glass shattered, tiny beads of mercury could scatter across the turkey or roasting pan. Mercury is highly toxic, and even small exposures cause serious health problems. Families might never know they were serving contaminated meat because the droplets were nearly impossible to see against gravy and stuffing. Once digital thermometers became affordable and reliable, the old mercury versions were phased out and eventually banned from food preparation entirely. Today, instant-read digital thermometers are the standard, but those old glass tubes served countless meals first. Decorating with glass ornaments at toddler height was one of those holiday traditions that seemed perfectly reasonable until you really thought about it. In the 1980s, families covered every reachable branch with delicate glass balls, painted figurines, and heirloom ornaments passed down through generations. The prettiest decorations often hung at the bottom where children could admire them up close. Toddlers grabbed ornaments constantly, sometimes gently and sometimes with enthusiastic force. When ornaments shattered, and they always shattered eventually, razor-sharp glass fragments scattered across carpets where babies crawled and small feet padded barefoot. Parents swept up what they could see, but tiny shards had a way of hiding in carpet fibers for weeks. Some children received cuts on their hands or feet, while others put broken pieces in their mouths before anyone could intervene. Today, most parenting guides recommend placing breakable ornaments well out of reach or switching to shatterproof alternatives for the lower branches. But in the 80s, glass ornaments went everywhere, and broken ones were simply part of the season. Kids playing with cap guns under the Christmas tree was the kind of Christmas morning chaos that defined the 1980s in ways both joyful and slightly terrifying. These toys produced real sparks and genuine bangs, filling living rooms with smoke, noise, and the unmistakable smell of burnt gunpowder. Children unwrapped their new cap guns, loaded the paper rolls, and immediately started firing while surrounded by torn wrapping paper, dry pine needles, and cardboard boxes. The sparks flew in every direction, sometimes landing on materials that could easily catch fire. Nobody thought to move the celebration away from the tree or wait until the mess was cleaned up. Parents laughed at the enthusiasm while smoke drifted toward the ceiling. The combination of open sparks, dry tree, and flammable debris created conditions that fire safety experts would later describe as extremely dangerous. Today, cap guns have largely been replaced by electronic toys that produce sound effects without combustion. Modern families are also far more aware of fire risks near Christmas trees. But in the 80s, the bang of cap guns was simply the soundtrack of Christmas morning. Hosting indoor fireplace parties without proper ventilation was the kind of cozy gathering that made 1980s holiday entertaining feel warm, intimate, and slightly hazardous. Families packed living rooms with guests, piled logs into the fireplace, and let the flames roar while everyone chatted and laughed. The room grew warmer and smokier as the evening progressed, but nobody thought to crack a window or check whether the damper was fully open. Smoke curled along the ceiling, and guests occasionally coughed or rubbed their eyes, but the atmosphere felt too festive to interrupt. Children played near the hearth while adults gathered around, soaking in the warmth without realizing how much carbon monoxide might be building up in the enclosed space. Headaches and drowsiness were blamed on holiday exhaustion rather than poor air quality. Fire codes and building regulations now require proper ventilation when operating fireplaces, and carbon monoxide detectors have become mandatory in most homes. Looking back, those crowded fireplace gatherings carried risks that only became obvious once the science caught up with tradition. Using flammable aerosol hairspray to frost windows was one of those creative holiday hacks that seemed brilliant until you thought about it for more than 5 seconds. In the 1980s, families who wanted frosted window effects discovered that a heavy coat of hairspray created a similar look. The fine mist settled onto glass, dried into a cloudy film, and made windows look like they belonged in a winter wonderland. Kids loved helping with the project, spraying generous clouds onto every pane while parents admired the results. What nobody considered was that most hairsprays of the era were highly flammable, and spraying them near holiday candles, space heaters, or fireplace sparks created real danger. The propellants in those cans could ignite with surprising speed, and the residue left on windows remained combustible long after it dried. House fires traced back to aerosol products near open flames became a recognized pattern. Today, safer alternatives exist, and warning labels on aerosol cans have grown much more prominent. But in the 80s, hairspray on windows was just another holiday trick. Kids handling broken ceramic ornaments barehanded was one of those holiday cleanup moments that happened so often nobody stopped to question it. In the 1980s, when an ornament slipped off a branch and shattered on the floor, children rushed to help gather the pieces before anyone could stop them. Parents appreciated the enthusiasm and rarely intervened beyond a casual warning to be careful. Kids picked up jagged ceramic shards with bare fingers, sometimes cutting themselves but treating it as a minor inconvenience rather than a real injury. The fragments had sharp edges that sliced skin easily, and smaller pieces often embedded themselves in fingertips without anyone noticing until later. Some children stepped on overlooked shards while walking barefoot through the living room days afterward. Infections from dirty cuts were not uncommon, and a few unlucky kids needed stitches from particularly nasty breaks. Today, parents are far more likely to keep children away from broken decorations and use gloves and vacuums to handle the cleanup safely. But in the 80s, picking up sharp pieces with bare hands was simply how kids helped. Drinking eggnog made with raw unpasteurized eggs was the homemade holiday tradition that grandmothers swore by and health officials would later condemn. In the 1980s, families whipped up batches of creamy eggnog using fresh eggs cracked straight from the carton, never pausing to consider what might be lurking inside those shells. The recipe called for raw yolks beaten with sugar, cream, and a generous splash of bourbon, then served in crystal cups to guests of all ages. Children drank it alongside adults, savoring the rich sweetness without anyone mentioning bacteria or food safety. The eggs came from local stores or sometimes backyard chickens, and nobody thought to ask whether they had been pasteurized. Salmonella contamination was a real risk that most families never considered, and outbreaks linked to homemade eggnog eventually made headlines. Health officials began warning against raw egg consumption, and commercial eggnog switched to pasteurized ingredients. Today, most recipes call for cooked custard bases or pasteurized egg products, but the old-fashioned raw version still holds a nostalgic place in holiday memories for those who survived it. Letting kids sit in open car trunks watching Christmas parades was the kind of improvised family seating that made perfect sense in the 1980s. Parents drove to parade routes early, backed into prime viewing spots, and popped open the hatchback so children could dangle their legs over the edge with the best view in town. Kids wrapped in blankets sat perched on the trunk floor, waving at floats and catching candy tossed by passing performers. The arrangement felt clever, comfortable, and completely normal. Nobody worried about children falling out, getting hit by passing vehicles, or sitting in spaces designed for luggage rather than passengers. Some families even let kids ride in open trunks during the slow drive home, too tired and sugar-crashed to climb into proper seats. Today, child passenger safety laws strictly prohibit anyone riding in cargo areas, and parents who tried this would face immediate legal consequences. The parade viewing hack that once felt practical is now recognized as genuinely dangerous. But for 80s kids, sitting in that open trunk meant having the best seat at the best show of the holiday season. Holiday punch bowls and cheese balls were the twin stars of every grown-up Christmas party. In kitchens across America, tables gleamed under the light of cut glass bowls filled with ruby red punch floating with slices of orange. Nearby, cheese balls rolled in nuts, or parsley sat proudly beside stacks of Ritz crackers. The smell was rich, savory, and sweet all at once, and every adult had their own secret recipe. Laughter grew louder with each refill, stories grew taller, and someone always spilled just a little on the tablecloth. Kids peeked in from the hallway, stealing crackers before running off again. These gatherings were more than parties. They were annual reunions, proof that friendship could be as warm as the punch itself. Even now, the sight of that silver ladle or the taste of cheddar mixed with cream cheese can bring the past rushing back. It wasn't about sophistication, it was about celebration, plain and true. The clink of glasses, the glow of the tree, the hum of old records. Together they made the room feel like Christmas itself. It felt like freedom. Pulling into a gravel lot under the open sky, car windows rolled down, static-filled speakers hanging from the window. Drive-in theaters were the closest thing to magic many kids in the 1970s ever experienced. There was something cinematic about the whole ritual, even before the movie started. Blankets in the back seat, popcorn passed from hand to hand, mosquitoes dancing in the glow of the projector. You were watching the big screen, but living a story of your own. First kisses happened there. First heartbreaks, too. For families, it was a cheap night out. For teens, it was a playground of possibility. The movie was important, sure, but it was also background, just one part of the experience. You could laugh out loud, talk during scenes, even sneak in friends in the trunk. And when the weather was just right, with the air warm and still, it felt like the whole world had pressed pause just for you. Double features stretched late into the night, and the drive home felt like floating. Today, we sit in dark theaters with strangers, faces lit by phones, silent and separate. But at the drive-in, the experience was shared, across windshields, across families, across communities. It was noisy, it was messy, but it was real. You did not just watch a movie, you became part of one. Every region had its own late-night monster movie host, and they were as much a part of Halloween as candy corn. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, was the undisputed queen, with her sharp wit and gothic glamour. But local stations had their own icons. Count Gordevol, Goulardi, or even unnamed Creepy Carl types who introduced old horror flicks between corny jokes and bad puns. They were part comedian, part ringmaster, and part babysitter for every kid sneaking TV past midnight. The crackle of the local station's signal, the host's booming laugh, and the low-budget props made it all feel personal. In a world before the internet, they were our strange, wonderful guides through the shadows. They broadcast from tiny studios decorated with fake cobwebs and rubber bats. But to kids staying up past bedtime, it felt like a secret world. The movies they showed were usually low-budget classics, filled with rubber monsters and grainy film. Yet those hosts made them unforgettable. Their humor softened the scares, turning horror into something cozy and communal. Watching them felt like hanging out with an eccentric friend who loved Halloween as much as you did. They made the weird feel welcoming, and every terrible movie a little more fun. Driving home. Christmas trees on car roofs without tying them properly was almost a holiday sport in the 1970s. Families would buy a tree that was always 2 feet taller than the living room allowed, hoist it onto the roof by sheer force of will, and toss 1 or 2 loops of twine over it with a confidence that probably came from nowhere rational. The wind would whip through the branches as the car pulled onto the road, and everyone inside held their breath just a little, watching for any sudden wobble. Nobody thought about fines or traffic violations or the possibility of the tree tumbling dramatically into the street. It was just part of the adventure, part of the ritual of getting that perfect pine safely home. Today, though, even slightly unsecured loads can earn you a ticket on the spot. Highways and city streets have become strict zones of compliance, leaving no room for the messy charm of trial and error. But the memory of those rides home, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pine creeping into the car, remains untouchable. Bubble lights on Christmas trees were little tubes of magic, glowing like tiny lava lamps across the branches. Each bulb, filled with colored liquid, would come alive as the heat rose and bubbles began to dance inside. Kids would stare for minutes, mesmerized by their rhythm and sparkle. They weren't just decorations, they were living, glowing proof that the tree was awake. Every family had their favorite color, blue, red, or gold, and everyone knew not to touch them while they bubbled. They hummed softly in the darkened room, a hypnotic mix of science and Christmas wonder. Parents loved them for their retro charm, and children swore they were enchanted. Even though the cords tangled and a bulb would always refuse to work, no one cared. The glow they gave off felt warm and alive, different from any ordinary light. When the tree lights went out at night, the last few bubbles would rise, fade, and rest, like Christmas itself taking a breath before morning. They were fragile, fleeting, and unforgettable. Long before LED strings or flashing displays, bubble lights were a simple kind of magic that needed no batteries, only wonder. Disco was not just music, it was movement, the kind that pulsed through your chest and told your body to rise. In the 1970s, disco swept through clubs, airwaves, and teenage bedrooms with a glittering swagger. The Bee Gees, Donna Summer, Chic. Their beats became the background to breakups, makeouts, and Friday nights that never wanted to end. Disco was light in the darkness. It was escapism with a beat. Under mirrored balls and strobe lights, people forgot their troubles and danced like the world would never stop spinning. And for a while, it did not. Disco was inclusive. Black, brown, white, gay, straight, everyone could find themselves in the rhythm. It was the sound of unity, even if just for one night. It was freedom in 4 on the floor time. Parents called it noise. Politicians mocked it. But young people knew better. They knew disco was more than polyester and falsetto. It was the right to feel good, to be seen, to take up space. And when the backlash came, when disco records were burned and mocked, it felt like something sacred was being stolen. But the beat never really stopped. It just went underground. And in quiet corners of memory, it still plays, waiting for you to dance again. Before themed buckets and designer treat bags, Halloween in the 1980s was ruled by paper grocery sacks. Stores like Safeway, Winn-Dixie, and Piggly Wiggly gave out their own branded trick-or-treat bags covered in cartoon ghosts, smiling pumpkins, and bold store logos. Kids would line up near the entrance, clutching these paper treasures like golden tickets. The bags were huge, promising endless candy, until it rained or the bottom tore halfway through the night. You could tell who had the best haul by whose bag was reinforced with duct tape by the end of the evening. Parents loved the convenience, and grocery stores loved the free advertising. It was the perfect marriage of commerce and candy. The artwork on those bags was pure 1980s charm. Thick outlines, goofy ghosts, and fonts that looked hand-drawn. Kids would sometimes color them in with crayons while waiting for trick-or-treat time to start. The crinkling sound of the bag swinging at your side became part of the night's rhythm, mixing with the crunch of leaves underfoot. Even when plastic pumpkin buckets started taking over, the old paper bag still had soul. It represented a simpler Halloween, one built on community, local stores, and the excitement of seeing how much candy one bag could really hold. Homemade extension cord octopus plugs for tree lights were one of those wildly creative, wildly unsafe tricks families used without hesitation in the 1970s. You would see a single outlet powering an entire forest of cords behind the tree, all tangled together like someone tried to knit with electricity. These improvised clusters allowed families to plug in the lights, the rotating tree stand, the music box, and maybe even an extra lamp or two. No one worried about overheating or sparks or overloaded circuits. It was simply the only way to make everything work with the limited outlets older homes had. People trusted their instincts, not safety manuals. Today, though, building or using something like that is a clear violation of electrical codes. You can be fined, cited, or required to remove them immediately. Modern power strips have surge protection, insulation rules, and testing certifications because the old methods caused more fires than most families ever knew. The shift feels huge when you think about it. Back then it was creativity. Today it is negligence. But anyone who grew up during those years remembers crouching behind the tree, plugging one more cord into the impossible cluster, hoping it stayed together just long enough to make the living room glow. Homemade fudge and divinity candy were the edible treasures of the season. Pots clattered, spoons stirred, and sugar clouds filled the kitchen with the scent of patience. Grandmothers stood watch like generals of sweetness, stirring just long enough for the fudge to thicken or the divinity to hold its shape. Every batch felt like alchemy, boiling sugar, butter, and cocoa transforming into something smooth and rich. A good batch was gold. A bad one meant starting over, but no one complained. It was a labor of love, not convenience. Wax paper lined the counters, cooling the treats before they were wrapped in ribbons or tucked into tins for neighbors. Children were allowed to lick the spoons, the taste warm and sugary and perfect. When shared, it wasn't just candy. It was affection that could be held in your hand. Those recipes were family heirlooms, passed on with smudged cards and whispered instructions. Even today, the first bite of homemade fudge still tastes like a memory that never stopped being sweet. The Brady Bunch was not just a sitcom. It was a mirror held up to a hopeful America, one that wanted to believe that everything broken could be blended. A widow with 3 sons, a widower with 3 daughters. Together, they made a perfect mess of a family. For children of the 1970s, this show was more than after-school television. It was comfort. It was order. It was the dream of getting along even when everything changed. You saw yourself in Jan's jealousy, Greg's swagger, or Cindy's innocence. The shag carpet, the avocado kitchen, the tic-tac-toe lawn, it was all so vivid, it practically lived in your memory. It made divorce and remarriage look easy, even fun. It was not about realism, it was about possibility. The show taught you how to talk through feelings, even if the solutions were wrapped up neatly in 25 minutes. It taught you that families were not defined by blood, but by how hard you were willing to try. You sang along with the theme song like it was scripture. You knew that no matter the problem, school, dating, hair, there was always a resolution. It made growing up feel a little less scary, and when you look back now, maybe it was too perfect. But in a world that often felt messy, the Brady house gave you a place to believe that everything, somehow, could work out. It started with a yellow circle and 2 black dots, a simple smile drawn to brighten up a workplace. But by the 1970s, it had become something much bigger, everywhere, on everything. The smiley face was more than a logo. It was a feeling, a hope, a little sun on a pin. You saw it on buttons, t-shirts, lunchboxes, coffee mugs, and even wallpaper. It winked from notebooks and bumper stickers. It cheered up grocery bags. It followed you into stores and classrooms and dreams. It became the unofficial mascot of the 1970s. Cheery, slightly cheesy, and weirdly profound. But under the cheerfulness, there was something deeper, maybe even desperate. Because behind every exaggerated grin is a question. Do we really feel as good as we pretend? Maybe not. But wearing that face gave us permission to try. It reminded us that happiness could be a choice, or at least a style. It was optimism pinned to your chest. And in that decade, people needed it. Cutting down a Christmas tree from public land was one of those bold, adventurous family outings that made the holidays feel like something out of a classic American story. Parents would pack everyone into the car, drive out to a wooded area or a quiet clearing, and pick the perfect tree with nothing but excitement guiding them. Kids loved the idea of choosing a tree that nobody else had touched, one that looked wild and authentic and worthy of being the centerpiece of the living room. The crunch of snow, the cold air, and the thrill of the hunt made the whole day unforgettable. Back then, few people worried about permits or restrictions, especially in rural areas where land boundaries blurred and tradition spoke louder than rules. Today, though, cutting a tree from public land without permission is a criminal offense. Forestry regulations protect natural habitats, and conservation laws control how many trees can be removed each season. The adventure that once felt wholesome and free now comes with fines, penalties, and sometimes even court involvement. It shows just how much the world has changed. What families once saw as bonding time in nature is now something you need paperwork to do. But the memories remain as crisp as the winter air that once filled those stolen forests. The air smelled like spring and slogans. On April 22, 1970, something shifted. It was the first Earth Day, and it spread like a pulse through classrooms, parks, and communities across the country. Suddenly, children were planting trees, picking up trash, and learning words like pollution and conservation. In a time of war and political unrest, Earth Day felt pure. It was something everyone could agree on. The planet was in trouble, and it was up to the people to save it. Teachers handed out buttons. Posters popped up with cartoon animals crying. The message was simple: act now or lose everything. Families joined in. Local events featured music, speeches, recycling drives. Some kids even marched with handmade signs, their crayons bleeding in the rain. It felt important. It felt possible. For a generation that had grown up watching smokestacks and oil spills, Earth Day was a wake-up call. It told you that your choices mattered, that nature was not endless, that small actions could ripple into real change. And even though it started as a one-day event, it planted something bigger. It gave children of the 1970s a cause, a sense of power, and the memory of standing in a park, dirt on your hands, feeling like a hero, that never leaves you. Parade TV, watching on Christmas morning, was the calm before the storm. The quiet moment when the whole family gathered together, still in pajamas, before the sound of tearing wrapping paper filled the house. The television flickered with color as floats from the Disney Christmas parade glided down Main Street, Mickey and Minnie waving through clouds of fake snow. Children leaned forward, half eating breakfast, half dreaming of being there in person, while parents sipped coffee and let the warmth of the morning sink in. The brass bands played carols that seemed to echo through the room, and Disney characters danced with precision that felt impossibly perfect. Every float was a moving painting, shimmering tinsel, waving princesses, candy canes taller than cars. For 1 hour, the living room turned into the happiest place on earth. When Santa appeared at the end, it felt like the signal. Now Christmas had truly begun. Some families kept the parade on in the background while gifts were passed around, the announcers' cheerful voices mingling with laughter and the rustle of wrapping paper. Others made it a ritual, no gifts until Santa's sleigh appeared on screen. It wasn't just a parade, it was a rhythm, the heartbeat of a generation's Christmas morning. The glow of the television matched the glow of the tree, and for a while, the world outside disappeared. Watching the parade meant something simple but sacred: family, together, beginning the day in wonder before the chaos of joy took over. Local radio stations in the 1980s treated Halloween like a community event. DJs hosted call-in costume contests where listeners described their outfits live on air and hoped to win movie tickets, cassette tapes, or free pizza coupons. Some stations even organized drive-by parades, setting up tents in parking lots where families could pull up, show off costumes, and honk for prizes. The excitement crackled through the airwaves, spooky sound effects between songs, DJs laughing at corny jokes, and callers breathlessly describing homemade werewolf costumes made of old fur coats. The contests brought towns together before social media ever could. You would sit in the car with your parents, the heater humming, waiting to hear if your neighbor or classmate won. Sometimes the radio would play Thriller or Ghostbusters, and everyone in the car would sing along. It was fun, loud, and completely local. There was pride in hearing your small-town station go all in for Halloween. The prizes were cheap, but the bragging rights were priceless. Winning a radio contest felt like being famous for one night. Long before podcasts or live streams, these Halloween broadcasts turned ordinary evenings into shared celebrations that stretched across every driveway and diner in town. Neighborhood tree-burning events after Christmas were practically a community ritual in the 1970s. Once the holidays were over, families would drag their old trees to a designated spot, sometimes a park or an empty lot, and watch them go up in flames with everyone gathered around. The fire shot up fast, fueled by the dryness of the pine needles, and the heat would hit your face before you even stepped close. People brought cocoa, told stories, and treated it like one final celebration before the long winter settled in. There was a strange beauty in watching the last symbol of Christmas burn away, a feeling that the season was ending with a bang rather than a quiet whimper. Today, though, the idea of burning trees in a communal fire is strictly illegal. Air pollution laws, fire safety risks, and local regulations shut down anything that involves open burning of plant material. What was once a neighborhood farewell to the holiday season is now viewed as dangerous and irresponsible. But the memory of those glowing piles of branches remains vivid for anyone who stood beside them, feeling both warmth and closure in the orange light. TV variety. Christmas specials made every living room feel like the front row of a show. From Donnie and Marie Osmond's sparkling duets to Bob Hope's heartfelt jokes, these broadcasts turned holiday nights into small screen events. Families gathered together in pajamas, popcorn bowls ready, as familiar faces sang carols under glittering stage lights. The sets looked magical. Fake snow falling in perfect rhythm, choirs swaying behind big smiles, and stars dressed in sequins that caught the camera's glow. It was glitzy and sentimental all at once, a snapshot of show business wrapped in red and green. Parents adored the humor, kids waited for the songs, and everyone joined in when the finale rolled around. Dolly Parton could bring a tear to even the toughest dad with her soft Tennessee drawl and silver microphone. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a tradition, a reminder that Christmas could make everyone pause together for one shared hour. When the credits rolled, the warmth in the room lingered longer than the applause. Before streaming, these specials were the heartbeat of television Christmas, fleeting, festive, and full of charm. The sound was unmistakable, a sharp, rhythmic clack-clack that echoed through playgrounds and living rooms like a call to battle. Clackers were two acrylic balls connected by a string, swung up and down until they collided with terrifying precision. In the 1970s, they were everywhere, in backpacks, in coat pockets, in secret stashes under school desks. You did not just own clackers, you trained with them. Kids turned into street performers, mastering the hypnotic rhythm until the balls moved like extensions of their hands. They bruised wrists, cracked knuckles, and left dents in drywall. But that was part of the fun. The danger made it cooler. Every successful round felt like victory. Every failed attempt, a dare to try again. You showed off your skills like a magician, daring others to match your speed. Parents worried. Teachers banned them. News reports claimed they could shatter and send shards flying. But still, we clacked. Because they were more than toys. They were rhythm, challenge, power. Today's toys are safer, quieter, more digital. But nothing ever felt quite as alive or as rebellious as two plastic spheres slamming together in your hands. Clackers taught you coordination, sure, but they also taught you the joy of risk. Children participating in live nativity scenes with real animals was a cherished holiday experience in the 1970s. Schools and churches would gather goats, donkeys, sheep, or even small calves, placing them in straw-lined corners while children in robes acted out the story of the Nativity. The animals brayed, shifted, or occasionally caused chaos, but everyone loved it. There was something magical about sharing the stage with creatures that felt straight out of the story itself. Children learned gentleness and patience in ways no classroom lesson could teach, and the unpredictability of the animals made every performance feel alive. Parents watched proudly, cameras in hand, capturing moments that felt sacred in their simplicity. But today, safety and liability laws make this nearly impossible. Real animals require permits, supervision, insurance, and strict handling rules. Most places do not attempt it anymore. The warmth of those live scenes has been replaced by cardboard props or digital projections. Yet anyone old enough to remember those nights can still smell the hay and hear the soft bleats that completed the scene. It started with a jukebox and a smile. When Happy Days came on television, the world slowed down for half an hour. Set in the 1950s but broadcast in the 1970s, it was more than nostalgia. It was a lifeline to simpler dreams. There was something comforting about Richie's earnestness, Potsy's innocence, and Fonzie's leather-clad cool. The Fonz was not just a character, he was legend. With a snap of his fingers or a bump of his fist, he could make machines obey and crowds hush. But under the charm, the show was about family, about friends, about figuring life out one lesson at a time. And for kids growing up in the uncertain shadows of Watergate and Vietnam, this fictional past offered a soft place to land. You could laugh, sigh, and believe, even if just for 25 minutes, that the world could be gentle again. Happy Days taught you about loyalty, about standing up for your friends, about first dates and heartbreaks and how to be kind without losing your cool. You knew the theme song by heart. It played like an anthem, reminding you that somewhere, life could be bright and filled with milkshakes and diner booths. Watching it now feels like stepping back into a memory that was never yours, but always felt like home. Homemade felt stockings with sequins were labors of love that hung proudly from mantels. Each one told a story, stitched by hand, decorated with glue and glitter, buttons for eyes, and yarn for names. They weren't bought. They were built, piece by piece, often around the kitchen table. Mothers snipped fabric scraps from old clothes, turning them into something bright and personal. Children helped, scattering sequins across the floor like tiny stars. The stockings weren't perfect, but that made them beautiful. Some had snowmen, others reindeer, some just a name stitched crooked in red thread. They were light, soft, and warm to the touch, filled with small gifts and candy canes that made Christmas morning shimmer. Even when the seams came loose or the colors faded, no one could throw them away. Each stitch held the sound of laughter and the smell of cookies baking in the next room. Today's store-bought stockings look clean and precise, but they can't hold the heartbeat sewn into those homemade ones. Letting kids sit on Santa's lap without background checks for performers was as normal as candy canes in the 1970s. Every mall, store, and community center had a Santa who showed up for a few weeks each year, ready to greet every child with a warm laugh and a holiday smile. Parents lined up without a second thought, snapping photos as their kids clutched Santa's coat and whispered their wishes for Christmas morning. People believed deeply in the goodness of the role, not the resume behind it. Santa was seen as a symbol of kindness, not a figure who needed screening or verification. Trust was the wrapping paper that held the whole tradition together. No one asked about training or screening or documentation. It was simply assumed that Santa was safe. The world trusted the suit, the beard, and the magic behind the role. Today, though, every performer must be vetted, monitored, and cleared under strict regulations. The innocence of the moment is now wrapped in paperwork and policies. Maybe it is necessary, but it also reminds us of a time when trust came easier and magic needed no signatures. Glow-in-the-dark window clings were a Halloween miracle wrapped in cheap plastic. Every kitchen, classroom, and front window in the 1980s had at least a few. Bright green ghosts, crooked pumpkins, or grinning black cats that looked best under a porch light. You peeled them off their backing and smoothed them onto glass with small, sticky hands. The thrill came at night when they glowed faintly, turning windows into mini haunted displays. They were reusable in theory, but after a few weeks, they collected dust, lint, and dog hair until they looked like haunted moss. Even so, no one threw them away. Moms carefully peeled them off and stuck them on wax paper, storing them in the decorations box for next year. By Christmas, most windows still had faint ghost outlines that refused to wash off, glowing a little less each week. Kids would press their faces to the glass, admiring the eerie green shapes shining against the dark. These clings were small, simple, and magical. A piece of low-tech wonder that made even an ordinary kitchen window feel like part of Halloween night. They did not need batteries or screens, just the simple joy of glowing in the dark. If any of these banned 80s traditions brought back memories or made you grateful times have changed, share your story in the comments, tap like and subscribe so you never miss another trip into holiday history.